Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. It's time to discuss the issues of the day here at 1850 Main Street.
A lot of people are obsessed with polling numbers. Do polls even matter this far ahead of an election?
I had 3 different people over the weekend come up to me and want to talk about the same subject. That subject being polling, specifically presidential polling. And try and say this maybe I didn't want to talk about polling just because I don't think it
well, hang on, you're a numbers guy.
I know. I'm a numbers guy when it comes to
you're the guy. Wait, part of your job description in life is to be the executive director of iVoters.com, which deals with numbers on elections, and has like since 1998. And you don't buy polling?
Well, I was like trying to explain. I am all about numbers. I go to 270 to win a lot. I play a lot on there with maps. But I was trying to explain, like for me, polling, I want to dive deeper. I want to look at what questions were asked, how they were asked, who was asked, likely voters, registered voters. There's so many variables that go into polling. And I want to go look at the states that they're talking about and the voter differential from 2016 to 2020 to what we're talking about today, 2024. But I also said, do you realize the NFL season will be like 8 or 9 weeks old by the time we vote for president of the United States? So we haven't even had off-season training camps in some of these. The NFL schedule.
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to say that NFL season will be 8 or 9 weeks old before Cleveland has a starting quarterback. What did I miss there? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Shots fired. But I'm just trying to give people perspective on how far away it is. But we live in a society, we live in a world where that's what they're always trying to sell, to gin us up to talk about it. And I just didn't feel like talking about it because what we talk about today, I would like to record many of these people that are on television talking about polling, and they should have to watch that again. Like, you know what I mean? There should be a chart. Like,
man,
we know
a
guy's batting average.
Winding up here. Duncan's like winding up, waiting to get in on this.
I think the reason that Rob doesn't like to talk polling is precisely because he knows too much. It's not, he's not shirking his responsibilities on this. He knows too much. He's like the person who is a musician, and so they don't like the popular song. They like the B-side. They like the deeper back catalog, not the song everybody knows. So everyone wants to talk about polling with Rob, and he's like, why don't I tell you about the real story? This is the good song, So he's going a level deeper.
Okay, so let me ask you this one, Rob. Is there a method to the madness? I mean, I kind of understand why people are continually trying to look inside the box and find out what's going to happen, because people don't like not knowing what's going to happen. I mean, there's a lot of implications in regards to how these elections come out, whether you're talking about the presidency or the members of the House or governor's races or U.S. Senate. I mean, there's a lot on the line in 2024. And I mean, if somebody knew what was going to happen, they could make all kinds of decisions or plans or just feel better or feel worse. But is there more to this? I mean, is it the fact that the process is not legitimate?
Well, it's based on the questions that are asked. It could or couldn't be legitimate, but it's the greatest is the unknown. We don't really know what's going to happen. It's kind of like, on all these sporting analysis you see about the top recruiting class of 2025. Well, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, we don't know how they're going to turn out. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's how it is here. And I know we're not going to dive in and get into, but one of the candidates who's presumed to be on the ballot in all 50 states for one of the parties is on trial currently. Now, whether or not we think that's a legitimate trial or not, it's one thing, but the reality of it is Donald Trump is on trial. So there's so many factors, there's so many unknowns that are going to happen before Election Day, or even weeks and weeks before Election Day when people are allowed to vote, that we just don't know. There's so much unknown, but it's kind of like you gravitate towards the poll that you want to see or the results that you want to hear, because I think polling can give a false optimism for a lot of people. I remember when polling used to be totally different, Dave. It's kind of scary that I've been in this business long enough to be able to say that. I remember when newspapers would take polls and they would release them like the Sunday before Election Day, and many had a pretty good track record. I can remember where I was. You called me on the Friday before Election Day, 2006. We were in a major ballot campaign in one critical state, and we'd worked our tails off. And you called me that Friday afternoon, and you said, hey, I don't want you to change plans for the weekend. Go to all the events you're going to, do all the speeches you've had planned, meet with all the folks that you're going to meet with. Don't change, but we're going to win on Tuesday. We're going to win. The numbers are out. We have the polls, and everything was solidified. That was 4 days before, but that was also 18 years ago.
Well, and we can even go back farther to the Jimmy Carter election, in which Carter was informed on Saturday night before the Tuesday that there was no possibility that he was going to be reelected, that the numbers had turned so dramatically in the last 10 days that there was no scenario by which he would defeat Ronald Reagan in that election. Now, Rob, those are internal polls. Those were polls that were done internal by genuine scientists in the field of polling with tenacious commitment to trying to get a big enough sample that reflected people who truly are going to go vote based on their voter history and who admit out loud they're going to vote. Yeah. And then building a sample base that genuinely reflects the electorate geographically, economically, from political parties and non-parties. And the model is built with like a fine engine. I mean, the old idea that garbage in, garbage out in a computer. Well, in polling, your model is garbage in, garbage out. If you don't build the correct model, this is why people went nuts during COVID, because the COVID models were based upon such wild speculation and then interpreted by experts. Well, this is what's happening today in polling. Back in the ancient days when we got started in this whole enterprise, the kind of polls that you're talking about, all the way back to, we go back to Carter Reagan, the polls that were built were not paid for by media. No media people would buy a poll and then cover the poll that they bought and paid for on their own news. They'd be accused of creating their own news story. Now, that's all they do, shamelessly. They pick the questions, they pick the audience, they get the answer they want, and then they run it as the lead story of the news. And they went out and bought it. They bought the data.
They did. And you talked about internal polls. And I mean, let's look back to 2016. There's a lot of people, they talk about one of the biggest failures of the campaign of Hillary Clinton in 2016 was not understanding internal polls, not looking at internal polls, and not seeing that Wisconsin was in play and not visiting that key battleground state and understanding, hey, this is a possibility of what could happen. But when you don't understand the polling and what it looks like, bad things can happen.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for The Lamppost. Find out what America's talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
Well, and for the voters, for me at least as a voter, 2016 broke my trust in the modern polling methodologies forever until something massive changes. I don't know how anybody can trust these polling methodologies now after seeing how wrong they all were, to your point, Rob, in 2016.
Yeah, I think the first thing, Alan, in that regard is that we got to remember there are inside polls that may be much more accurate, and then there are polls that are outside polls, in essence, being done for media. Now, let me make you an even greater skeptic and throw this theory out. And I don't think you have to have tinfoil to build a hat to make this one make sense. And that is that there is a distinct motivation on the part of media outlets to cast an election as a drama, as a story, and to use the polling numbers to get the most mileage out of the drama in the story. Like right now, we've got the storyline being that regardless of any other questions in regards to the Trump campaign, whether it was opponents inside the primary process or trials or penalties or whatever, Donald Trump is the clear walk-away winner of this election, which casts Joe Biden as the underdog. Now, if you're the Biden campaign, would you rather be viewed as the incumbent whose race it is to lose and who's slipping, or would you rather be the person who has no chance of defeating the giant who's coming at him? But good old Joe is somehow going to change the direction of this, and suddenly the traction will come flowing back because America loves an underdog. Yeah. If you're a consultant, which picture do you want?
Yeah, America loves an underdog, and they also love painting someone as a giant, as a Goliath on the other side, because that helps you raise money to defeat that giant, to defeat that Goliath.
Well, and speaking of underdogs, what do you make of how the polls are talking about how RFK Jr. affects the outcome of the presidential race? You know, what do you I don't know, what do you think about that? Who they're arguing who he hurts more, who he hurts less, who he helps. I don't know, thoughts.
Oh, I think that play's yet to come, Alan. I think it's there and it's being kicked around now. I'm not so sure that the script writers, because they don't want him on the stage, they're not exactly sure.
That seems clear. Yeah.
Exactly what they do with him.
I agree with you, Dave. I think right now it's straight guesswork. No one knows. No one knows.
But let's think about this one in regards to the conspiracy. The big mistake that the Podesta campaign for Hillary Clinton, because John Podesta ran Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016, was they came at this as the leader. They came at this as she's inevitable. There's no way in the world America would elect Donald Trump, especially over Hillary Clinton. And so she was the presumed victor. They presumed victory. Look at how they conducted themselves on election night. Everything in their campaign was Hillary is inevitable. Now, that campaign strategy worked brilliantly in the first election of Barack Obama because they rode the wave of the inevitability of a black president, which was something that everyone in America, regardless of their politics, I'm telling you, virtually everyone, I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, but I don't know any, people who said, what do you think about the idea of having a black president in America? And people say, I hope that happens soon. Now, a lot of those people didn't vote for Barack Obama, but they didn't vote for him because he was black. All right? And a lot of those people, when he won, they said, well, we've got a black president. That says something very good about our country. Even though they were opposed to everything he stood for, they still could applaud the man in the office. Now, this was that inevitability, hope and change. Barack Obama didn't even have to put his name on his yard signs. All he had to say was hope and change. And Podesta and company saw that momentum. So they tried to create that inevitability with Hillary Clinton. Now we're going to have the first female president. Here it is. It's stage 2. It's act 2. We're there. Here it is. And they got beat by the underdog. This time, I think they've decided they like the underdog lane. I wouldn't be surprised that someday in the great beyond, you'll see emails and messaging between key players in these strategy groups that are saying, we like it right where it is. Keep losing a little longer. Kind of like Rocky versus Clubber Lang. Keep fighting as a righty until we tell you when to make the switch.
Well, and that's the funny thing. The funny thing is, you have one candidate who's in court currently, but he's not the underdog. He's being assailed from all sides. Whether you think these are self-inflicted wounds or from the outside, he's I
don't know whether
you
call him Goliath, right? Or is he Goliath or Gulliver, right? But he's the big one.
Well,
that was good.
You talk about them wanting to stay in that underdog lane. That's why we've said often the far left is just as addicted to Donald Trump as the far right. They need him to be that bad guy, because he plays that role so well to so many. no matter which side of the aisle you're on. There are people that have said they won't vote for Donald Trump if he's on the ballot in 2024.
Well, this conversation at 1850 is not necessarily for everybody. I recognize that. We've come to this conversation after spending lifetimes in the field of public policy. And the reason that we're coming to this conversation is because we can see that there are dead ends and there are cliffs that the American enterprise of self-government is heading for, where they're heading into a dead end, into a wall, a brick wall, or we could be heading off of a cliff. I mean, there are directions in this public debate that are really bad, and they remind us of the conversations and the actions of people who 10 years before the Civil War couldn't help themselves. They got so far down the road that there was no reverse gear that was available and catapulted off the edge. And so this is a concern, and it's a deep and abiding concern that we have. So we talk about polling and the presidency. I mean, what I'm hearing you guys say, and I couldn't agree with more, is there's a lot of people who are in the business of manipulating public opinion. They used to not be in the polling business, but they are now. So how do you sort it out?
You always have to dive for the truth, look for the truth, and dig deep in those polls and understand that's exactly what they are. The only poll that matters is taken on traditionally the first Tuesday in November after the first Monday every other year in election years. But you have to look at the questions too. I mean, we could come up with a poll right now where you would say in some parts of the country, the sky is purple. Well, the reason for that is because the northern lights were visible earlier this month in much of the northern part of the country. So would you have to look at that part of the poll question of when it happened, why it happened? There's so much you can dig to find out what they're really asking, and more importantly, who they are asking these questions.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.